How to think about the great ideas. Mortimer Jerome Adler. To all the members of the Center for the Study of the Great Ideas. Preface. This book can be read either as an introduction to philosophy or as a thought-provoking treatment of selected philosophical issues by a living master of philosophical education. No contemporary philosopher has been so extraordinarily successful at encouraging philosophical thought and spreading philosophical knowledge as Mortimer Adler. The 52nd chapter of this book are the edited scripts of Professor Adler's classic TV series, The Great Ideas. Mortimer Adler's name will always be associated with the great ideas and the great books. It was Adler who first understood that there are limited numbers of great ideas which form the core of the thoughts of Western civilization and the keys to the great books. Heading a large research staff at the Institute for Philosophical Research, Dr. Adler spent 8 years constructing a reference work entitled Syntopicon, an index to the great ideas, a systematic and comprehensive inventory of the fundamental ideas to be found in the great books of the Western world. At first, Adler's team listed some 700 possible candidates for inclusion among the great ideas, but on closer examination over a two-year period, most of these turned out to be fragments or portions of more inclusive ideas. These were gradually eliminated, leaving 102 irreducible and indispensable great ideas. Over subsequent years, Dr. Adler has found no reason to eliminate any of the 102, and the great idea of equality has been added, making 103. For his path-breaking TV series on the great ideas, Dr. Adler selected 22 great ideas which would be most suitable for popular discussion, some of these requiring more than one TV show. Here are the 103 great ideas with the 22 selected for Adler's TV series listed in bold type. Angel, animal, aristocracy, art, astronomy and cosmology, beauty, being, cause, chance, change, citizen, constitution, courage, custom and convention, definition, democracy, desire, dialectic, duty, education, parentheses, learning, element, emotion, equality, eternity, evolution, experience, family, fate, form, God, good and evil, government, habit, happiness, history, honor, hypothesis, idea, immortality, induction, infinity, judgment, justice, knowledge, labor, parentheses, work, language, law, liberty, parentheses, freedom, life and death, logic, love, man, mathematics, matter, mechanics, medicine, memory and imagination, metaphysics, mind, monarchy, nature, necessity and contingency, oligarchy, one and many, opinion, opposition, philosophy, physics, pleasure and pain, poetry, principle, progress, prophecy, prudence, punishment, quality, quantity, reasoning, relation, religion, revolution, rhetoric, same and other, science, sense, sign and symbol, sin, slavery, soul, space, state, temperance, theology, time, truth, tyranny and despotism, universal and the particular, virtue and vice, war and peace, wealth, will, wisdom, world. All the great ideas are recognizably the same as they were in the ancient world. None of them is a modern discovery. The ancient Greeks had a name for all 103 of them. These ideas have been objects of speculation and inquiry since the beginning of human thought. They are the common stock of the human mind. The vast literature which exists on each great idea reflects not only the continuity of human thought about them, but also the wide diversity of opinions to which such thoughts inevitably give rise. By learning about the great ideas, we discover all the fundamental disagreements and agreements of humankind. Although the great ideas are the same as they were a millennium ago, this doesn't mean that there has been nothing new in the world of ideas. On the contrary, most of the great ideas have kept on changing and growing in substance and scope. In every epoch, intellectual geniuses, though they have not discovered new great ideas, have exposed new facets of the great ideas. Some great ideas, like prophecy or angel, had a livelier history in antiquity or the Middle Ages than more recently. Others, like progress or evolution, have seen an enormous expansion of attention and refinement in modern times. But even these modern ideas were clearly identified in antiquity. The ancients stole all our ideas from us, as Mark Twain worthily observed. Even more important than the living presence of the great ideas is its future. Each great idea is still imperfectly understood. Each is still unfinished business. Mortimer Adler has tried to understand the history of thinking about one after another of the great ideas, reading all the major writings on each subject, charting the whole range of different conceptions and theories which outstanding thinkers have advanced with respect to it, and assessing its present significance. Every one of the great ideas is a unique adventure. Each has an interior structure and life of its own. You can see this in the different strategies which Dr. Adler employs to tackle the different ideas in how to think about the great ideas. Some of the great ideas involve as many as 40 or 50 different main subdivisions. Others require only 10 or 15. Some have a relatively simpler internal structure, whereas others have a complex and intricate structure. Mortimer Adler has taught us that we are all philosophers. We all think well or sloppily, enthusiastically or inattentively. The slightest sense of perception, a falling leaf, a twinkling star, a smiling child, awakens our minds as well as arousing our feelings and forces us to ask why, what, whence, whither. Not to engage in this pursuit of ideas is to live like ants instead of humans. The ant can live without ideas because the whole course of its life is fixed, but human beings have the freedom and therefore the necessity to choose, and always to choose in terms of ideas. We have all become used to the notion that we live in a world with no more unexplored frontiers. We speak of pioneering as things of the past. We speak of pioneering as a thing from the past. We are encouraged to think that future breakthroughs will come from PhDs in white coats wielding astronomically expensive equipment. This is a colossal mistake, especially in the field of philosophy, the true realm of ideas. In the world of ideas, there is always pioneering to be done, and any one of us can do it, using the equipment with which we have been endowed, our minds. The great ideas belong to everyone. All the royalties from the sales of this book will go to the center of the study of the great ideas. A non-profit, a not-for-profit, 501c3 organization. Acknowledgements. Special mentions, but must be made in gratitude to Mr. and Mrs. Richards S. Wolfe, whose generosity underwrote the cost of producing the audio masters and transcriptions, without which this book would not have been possible. Richards. About the author. Born in Manhattan in 1902, Mortimer Jerome Adler at first wanted to become a journalist and dropped out of school at the age of 15 to work as a copyboy for the New York Sun. He worked there full-time for 2 years, doing a number of additional editorial tasks, including writing editorials. Adler attended Columbia University, where he refused to take part in physical education. As a result, Columbia would not give him a bachelor's degree, though he had fulfilled all the other requirements. He continued at Columbia as teacher and graduate student, gaining his PhD in experimental psychology in 1928. Adler was the only PhD in the country without a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, or a high school diploma. In 1929, the 27-year-old Mortimer Adler was hired as a professor of philosophy at the University of Chicago by the boy president of the university, Robert Maynard Hutchins, who had been appointed president at the age of 30. He had become dean of Yale Law School at 28. Together at Chicago, Adler and Hutchins became the center of swirling, often bitter, controversy. Adler and Hutchins attracted national attention as leaders in the development of a controversial new approach to liberal education centered on the great books. Although courses based on outstanding works of the past were already well known, Adler first popularized the phrase great books and great ideas, and provided focus to this organization of liberal education by emphasizing that there were a limited, objectively identifiable number of great ideas and great books. With Hutchins, Adler initiated the Great Books Foundation and the basic program of liberal education for adults. The turmoil at Chicago exploded in 1931 with an open revolt of infuriated faculty, culminating in a mass meeting in the university's Rockefeller Chapel, at which the faculty threatened mass resignation if their demands were not met. President Hutchins had to succumb to a number of demands, including the removal of Mortimer Adler from the philosophy department. Adler was given a position in the law school as associate professor of philosophy of law, and so he remained, as he put it later, at large. The unfriendly disputation continued for years, however, and became focused on Hutchins and Adler's position to instrumentalism in science, as well as their radical proposal for liberal education. These issues came to be portrayed as the Aristotelianism and even medievalism of Hutchins and Adler, as against the pragmatism and instrumentalism of the Chicago school, reflecting the influence of such progressive figures as Dewey and Mead. Although Adler and Hutchins were ultimately frustrated at Chicago, their ideas were implemented at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, and then by other St. John's colleges and by Thomas Aquinas College. The great book's approach was depicted by opponents as the imposition of medieval Thomism, yet the great books themselves included far more works by heretics and forbidden authors than by Catholics, and for that reason the great books program made little headway in specifically Catholic institutions. Having published Art and Prudence, a work which included a chapter applying the ideas of Aristotle's Poetics to movie cinematics, Adler became a consultant to the movie industry in its struggle to defend itself against the threat of censorship. His How to Read a Book became an international bestseller and successfully vanquished the then still prevalent idea that it was wrong to deface even one's own books. Adler's systematic, efficient method for marking up a book and quickly identifying its key elements has become standard practice among college students the world over. Adler now described the years 1938 to 43 as his Thomistic period, the time when he came closest to the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas. Although Adler's enemies had pegged him as a medievalist much earlier, from 1938, he attempted to communicate with the Orthodox Thomists of the American Catholic Philosophical Association, but the reaction of many Thomists was even more hostile to Adler than that of mainstream philosophers. He was attacked as a revisionist for attempting to improve upon the argument of Aristotle and Aquinas, especially for contending that Aquinas' arguments for the existence of God were not conclusive. After 1943, Adler largely gave up trying to influence Thomists, and, being out of sympathy with the direction of mainstream American philosophy, increasingly addressed himself to the intelligent layperson. However, with the passage of the year, more American Thomists have come to appreciate and agree with many of Adler's arguments. Adler continues to maintain that mainstream philosophy today has missed certain vital insights of Thomists' or Neo-Aristotelians' approach. Adler and Hutchins split over the issue of American involvement in World War II, with Hutchins taking the isolationist side. This disagreement, however, became irrelevant after Pearl Harbor. During and after the war, there was an active movement for world government. Adler became one of its leading spokesmen. He encountered some hostility after a statement falsely attributed to him. "We must do everything we can to abolish the United States," was widely publicized by the John Birch Society. Later, much to Adler's immense disappointment, the movement for world government evaporated almost alone. He has continued to publicly promote that idea. The Great Books movement became a popular cause, attracting the devotion of many thousands of adults across the country and drawing the attention of the media and of such notable as President Truman. Among a number of such hugely successful events, a 1948 presentation by Adler and Hutchins on Plato's account of the trial of Socrates, held at Chicago's Orchestra Hall, drew a capacity crowd of 3,000, with 1,500 people turned away. In 1943, the University of Chicago was given control of the content of the Encyclopedia Britannica, with an editorial board headed by Hutchins and later by Adler. Since editions of the great classics were then rare, Encyclopedia Britannica also commissioned the 54-volume set of the great books edited by Adler. Adler had the idea of an index to the great books which would delineate the discussion of all the great ideas, thus began to project for the Syntopicon, identifying the truly great ideas and finding all references to these in the great books. Adler had at his disposal a staff of over 30. An estimated compilation of the index would take 2 years and $60,000. In fact, it took 7 years and $1 million, making an outlay of $2.5 million for the whole set. Adler's staff grew to 25 indexers and over 50 clerical workers. These were the days before computers, and all the work was done on index cards, with typed out copies of all the cards prepared to date having to be continually updated for consolation by indexers. Each indexer represented a great author, so that, for instance, the indexer representing Marx would wrangle with the indexer representing Plato over the inclusion of particular topics. The set of great books sold tens of thousands of copies each year, reaching its height of 49,000 sets per year in the early 1960s. But it's doubtful whether it ever recouped the outlay. Adler's work on the Syntopicon led to the foundation of the Institution for Philosophical Research, which began work under his direction in San Francisco in 1952. The Institute aimed to achieve a dialectical summation of Western thought in the sphere of each one of its great ideas, though it was eventually realized that this might take centuries. The first tangible achievement was Adler's book, The Idea of Freedom. In 1963, the Institute moved to Chicago. Adler continued as its director, additionally taking up a Britannica lectureship at the University of Chicago and becoming editorial director of the new edition of the encyclopedia. At this time, Mortimer Adler's first marriage of 33 years ended in divorce. At the age of 60, Adler married 26-year-old Caroline Pring. They have 2 sons. The 15th edition of the Britannica, launched in 1974, followed Adler's organizational plan and was a radical departure from all earlier editions, known as Britannica 3, because of its 3-part structure: Propodia, Macropedia, and Micropedia. The new work preserved the alphabetical ordering principle for consultation while simultaneously depicting the orderly structure of all human knowledge. In 1982, responding to the perceived crisis in American public education, Adler, together with a number of other leading educators, and after intensive study and debate, launched the Pedia movement, calling for the abolition of multi-track schooling systems and arguing for a single elementary and secondary school curriculum for all students. He proposed to eliminate electives and other forms of specializations or vocational learning in the early stages of education, arguing that these should come only after a full course of basic education, which should be common to everyone. Both Adler's critics and his many admirers generally assumed that he was a religious person, probably a Roman Catholic, but for Adler, philosophical theology was the honest pursuit of a genuine intellectual puzzle, and although he early developed what he considers a sound argument for the existence of God, he had never made the leap of faith required to become a believer in the active and committed sense. When his book How to Think About God appeared in 1980, Many readers were astounded to find that not only was it explicitly addressed to pagans, it was also avowedly written by one. In 1984, following a mysterious and depressing illness, Adler made the leap of faith and was baptized into the Episcopalian Church. Author's introduction. What? That wasn't the introduction? It cannot be too often repeated that philosophy is everybody's business. To be a human being is to be endowed with the proclivity to philosophize. To some degree, we all engage in philosophical thought in the course of our daily lives. Acknowledging this is not enough. It is also necessary to understand why this is so and what philosophy's business is. The answer in a word is ideas. In 2 words, it is great ideas. The idea is basic and indispensable to understanding ourselves, our society, and the world in which we live. These ideas constitute the vocabulary of everyone's thought. Unlike the concepts of the special sciences, the words that name the great ideas are all words of ordinary, everyday speech. They are not technical terms. They do not belong to the private jargon of a specialized branch of knowledge. Everyone uses them in ordinary conversation, but everyone does not understand them as well as they can be understood, nor has everyone pondered sufficiently the questions raised by each of the great ideas. To think one's way through to some resolution of the conflicting answers to these questions is to philosophize. This book aims to do no more than to provide some guidance in this process. We have limited the consideration of these ideas to an outline that will try to achieve 3 results for you. First, it should give you a sure grasp of the various meanings of the word you use when you talk about the idea. Second, the delineation of each idea should make you more aware than you normally are of questions or issues that you cannot avoid confronting if you are willing to think a little further about the idea. Basic ones that human beings have been arguing about over the century. Third, in the consideration of each idea, we are led to the consideration of other ideas. How does our understanding of truth affect our understanding of goodness and beauty? How does our understanding of what is good and bad carry us not only to an understanding of what is right and wrong, but also to understanding of justice? Now, how does that affect our understanding of liberty and equality as well? If we have succeeded in these aims, we will have helped you engage in the business of philosophy, which is everybody's business, not only because nobody can do much thinking, if any at all, without using the great ideas, but also because no special technical competence of the kind that is imperative for the particular sciences and other special disciplines is required for thinking about the great ideas. Everybody does it, wittingly or unwittingly. I believe that this book will be helpful to those who would wish to do it just a little better. Mortimer Adler.